Hi, this is Teddy, and you're listening to Beto O'Rourke on Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast Podcast Network. Enjoy, y'all!
Are you listening?
Hey everyone, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast family of podcasts. I'm on with my co-host Sophy. Hey Sophy.
Hey Kelly.
And we are excited to be joined today by Beto O'Rourke, who has started a new organization called Powered by People that we're going to talk about. So hello, Beto.
Hey there. Thank you all for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, and I just before we started was saying that my 8-year-old Teddy likes to pronounce her name Beto, so we're going to get him settled that his mom is right. So,
well, I say Beto, which is the way that you introduced me, but I have heard Beto, which is your son's pronunciation. I've heard Beto, all variations, and all of them are fine with me.
As long as they vote for Democrats in Texas.
That's right. That's the important thing. Let's stay focused.
So when you left the presidential race, you made an announcement a little bit later that you were starting this organization called Powered by People. People like me and Sophie got really excited about it. I don't know if everyone cares about down ballot races in Texas, but they should. So tell us some about this organization you started and why this is your focus now.
Powered by People brings together volunteers. So your block walkers, your phone bankers, folks who want to text voters to work on state house campaigns in Texas, where we are only 9 seats down from commanding a majority for the first time since 2000. So this is a once in a 20-year opportunity. And a couple things about this are exciting to me. One is the chance in a census year, after which the political boundaries in Texas will be redrawn to have a Democratic majority, to stop the racist gerrymandering that has prevailed in Texas for decades. We were, until 2018, the worst state in terms of voter turnout, and it was not for a lack of love of our democracy. It was because we were literally drawn that way. And if you were Black or Hispanic, there's a good chance you were drawn out of a congressional district to diminish the power of your vote and minimize the chance that you actually go to the ballot box. So this very cynical, very racist strategy was very effective. So if we have a Democratic majority in the state house, we can redraw these political boundaries and congressional districts in a way that draws people in. And not only does that mean that you have more progressive voices in our state government, not only does it mean that you have a greater voter turnout, it means that you make progress on things that you really care about. So gun violence. What if Texas, of all states, were to take the lead on sensible gun legislation like universal background checks? What if Texas, the least insured state in the country, were to take the lead on expanding Medicaid so that more people can see a doctor or a healthcare provider? What if Texas, this oil and gas producing state, were to lead the fight on confronting climate change before it's too late? All of those things really only become possible if we win these really important elections. And a really interesting note, so we're 9 seats down. When I ran against Ted Cruz for U.S. Senate in 2018, I actually won more votes than he did in 9 of the seats that are now represented by a Republican. So not only is this possible, in some ways you could say we've done this before. And the way that we did it before in 2018 was by relying on the power of people. 20,000 Texans from all over the state, in all 254 counties, picked up a clipboard, knocked on doors, met their neighbors or complete strangers, and convinced them to vote for me. That's how we won more votes than any Democrat had in the history of the state of Texas. And we think that that power, if leveraged in these races, can produce the decisive difference so that we have that majority that we need. And then last thing, but a really important thing. As you all know, these down ballot races, so often forgotten if they were ever known, very little attention or focus paid on them, are so important for the up ballot races. So within every congressional district are contained 1, 2, maybe 3 different House districts, state House districts. And so organizing people at the state House level produces better results at the congressional level, and it works up the food chain to statewide results. So if we want to beat John Cornyn, and then for the holy grail of American politics, if we want to deliver the 38 electoral college votes in Texas to the Democratic nominee, whoever she or he may be, against Donald Trump, then organizing at this level is an imperative. And so for all of those reasons, we've devoted all that we've got in the O'Rourke family and all of our friends and supporters across the state into this effort to make sure that we do everything we can in the most important year of our lives.
So you mentioned how important the power of the people was in your 2018 campaign, but you were also just a star. You only lost by 2%. You got more votes than any Democrat ever in Texas. And so what do you think it was about your campaign and your message that really resonated with voters in Texas?
You know, in some ways, I was too dumb to know better than to run a campaign that would go across each one of the 254 counties of Texas and hold hundreds of town hall meetings and do them in places you might expect to find a Democrat, like in Austin or my hometown of El Paso, but also to go to places like King County that voted for Donald Trump 96% in the 2016 election, and to show up there and to listen to and meet the people that I wanted to represent and to serve, because I have no hope of winning and no hope of being able to deliver for them if I haven't met them first. And so that was a characteristic of the campaign that was different from any campaign that I've seen in Texas in my 47 years in this state. And we also ran with nothing to lose because, I mean, what did I have to lose? I was really an unknown congressman from West Texas, from El Paso, the only city in the Mountain Time Zone in the state of Texas, just geographically and politically isolated. And so, you know, no consultants, no pollsters, just going out and saying what I really believed and listening to the people that I wanted to serve and really having a really good time while we were doing that. And I think there was something about just how honest and raw and in some ways unprofessional that campaign was, and how much we depended on everyday people. We basically said, look, you live in Amarillo, Texas. You live in Longview. You live in Carthage. You want to be part of this campaign? Here are the basic rules of the road. You know, here's the open source code. And now just go for it. You just take it on. And however you want to connect with the voters in your community, get after it. And we'll support you in that. And so we really did place the power of that campaign as it raised more money and drew more attention into the hands of the people who really comprised the campaign at the end of the day. Those 20,000 people I mentioned earlier who had the courage to pick up a clipboard or to organize a phone bank at their homes. That's what I think the magic was in that campaign. And that's really what I hope we can return to in Powered by People. And I'll tell you, just from 3 weekends of block walking in January, I really see that power again. We had 1,100 people come down to Fort Bend, knock on over 41,000 doors. And I myself knocked on about 800 of those doors. And in some ways, I've never been happier because this is democracy stripped down to its bare bones, as old as democracy itself. It's exactly how they did it in Athens, 2,300 years ago. You're just meeting the people in a given community, eyeball to eyeball, talking to them. No more Facebook ads or TV commercials or slick mailers. It's just two humans connecting. And that is profound, really powerful, and just made me happy and made those who were campaigning with us very happy because, as you know, our politics has become so calculated, so triangulated, so divisive, so polarizing. And just to get back to just being cool to people and being honest with people is really something else. So I'm really, really happy to be doing this. And I love your question because I think it is a return to what was so special about the 2018 Senate campaign and really what we will need if we're going to be successful in Texas in 2020.
So I feel sometimes like there's this kind of existential crisis in the Democratic Party right now. You know, are we a super far left progressive party, or are we a moderate party? You know, what does that look like, and how do we win? And it sounds like maybe you're trying to cut through all of that and say how we win is by listening to people. And, you know, maybe that doesn't neatly line up with either of those kind of polls. Do you think that that's something that resonates in Texas specifically? Do you think that there's sort of a larger way of thinking about that? You know, obviously knocking every door of every house in the whole country is a big ask, but do you think we can sort of solve this existential crisis by really listening to people?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, you know, the conventional wisdom, again, that I was too dumb to adopt in 2018 was, if you're a Democrat in this traditionally red state of Texas, you run down the middle and you don't offend anybody, and, you know, you just pray that it works. But there's this guy, Jim Hightower. He was the commissioner of agriculture in Texas in the 1980s and is a folk hero in this state and is still a leader on progressive issues in Texas. And he has this saying, the only thing that you're going to find in the middle of the road are yellow lines and dead armadillos. Being in the middle and being safe and being calculated excites precisely no one. And so when I would travel Texas, this proud gun-owning state, and talk about an assault weapons ban, because I'd say, look, these weapons were designed for war, for killing people. You don't need them to hunt. You don't need them for self-defense. That might offend somebody, right? But if I were to say that in person at a town hall, and they could challenge me, they could stand up and say, you know what, Beto, I hear what you're saying, but on my ranch, we use these AR-15s to shoot feral hogs, which are an invasive species, and it's just a tradition in our family. And someone else would get up and say, hey, if you're using an AR-15 to shoot those hogs, then you're a pretty bad shot. Here's what I use, this hunting rifle over here. Man, I learned so much from being at those meetings, and I was no longer pegged on the political spectrum. I was just a fellow Texan showing up, sharing my views, and listening to yours. And that holds true on an issue like reproductive health care, which can be polarizing. But I'd say, look, in the last decade, as we have closed more than a quarter of family planning clinics, not only have we made it harder for a woman to get an abortion, we've also made it harder for her to see a provider of any kind, to get a cervical cancer screening. And we have produced a state that is absolutely deadly for women, a maternal mortality crisis unrivaled by almost any other state, and particularly deadly for women of color, 2 to 3 times as deadly for women of color. And so there we could find some common ground. If you are quote unquote pro-life, you certainly aren't happy with that outcome. And so maybe we can understand that reproductive health care is important for the legal right to an abortion, but it's also important for many other reasons. But can I get that across in a 30-second ad or a blip on Facebook or Twitter? Probably not. It really does take person-to-person direct engagement. And it's a slow, laborious, probably sometimes frustrating process. And when you're covering 254 counties, as we did in Texas, it's not easy. And you need, all of the 2 years that I needed in 2017 and 2018 to get that done. But I do think not only is that a path to victory, but I also think it is a way in which we heal this country. And we can have opposing views and still be civil and kind and cool to one another. That's the trick of American democracy. And it's what has made us the exceptional country on the face of the planet. And I don't have to tell you or your listeners, we are precariously close to losing that, for the biggest reason being Donald Trump and his destruction of institutions and norms. But all of us in a democracy are accountable and responsible for this. So let's each do our part. And for those of us in Texas, that's this effort of Powered by People, which, I could raise money and give it to candidates. I could be a talking head on TV. I could do any number of things. but I'm devoting everything to engaging people at a human to human level. I think it is so important.
So one thing that has sort of come out of this groundswell of progressive activism post-2016 is that we've seen a lot more women and younger people running for office in the country. And we've seen a lot more people with children running for office. And that's one of the things that really was interesting to me about your presidential campaign. You were one of the few candidates for president who was running and had kids at home. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the challenges of running a campaign with a young family at home and sort of what kind of a perspective that gives you?
Well, you don't see your family for the duration of the campaign, or at least that's been my experience. And I think candidates or potential candidates should be very honest with themselves and their families about this cost. There'll be folks who will try to talk you into it and say, you know what, we'll make it easier on your family. We'll make sure you see them. If you're doing this, well, I was about to say if you're doing this right. If you're doing this in the way that I've traditionally done it, you are all in, and all in means you're doing everything you can to meet every single voter who will decide the outcome of that election. And the heaviest burden is borne then by your family because you're engaged in the immediate action of the campaign. They're there to continue life as a family, to do whatever they were doing before you chose to run, and also to support you not just logistically. In our case, Amy, making sure that all three of our kids get to their different sports practices and school and to tutoring if they need it. But also she's got a job and a career and her own life to live. But then in addition, she's emotionally supporting me. And I'm the guy calling in from the road, whether in the Senate campaign it was Amarillo or in the presidential Des Moines, saying, Jesus, Amy, I don't know that I can do this another day. I am worn out and beat up and really having a tough time. And she would, always be the one to bring me back up and set me on the path and to remind me why the hell we were doing this in the first place. So that's something that we should be honest with ourselves about. And then I think we should also, whoever you like in your local city council race or on the Democratic presidential debate stage, and whoever you don't like, you should probably acknowledge that all of them and their families have made significant sacrifices in order to run for public office. And it's not easy, and we should commend them for doing that. But I will say this, the reason I am so excited to support so many women, in fact, all of the candidates that I've supported thus far this year have been women, is that they particularly take on a heavy load, because not only are they the candidate who very often has to leave their family to go out on the campaign trail and raise money and perform in debates, but they are by and large still carrying the majority of the weight when it comes to raising their family or running that whole household or pursuing their career. I was just talking to Brandy Chambers, who's one of these amazing women who's running for the state house in Texas and who's going to win this year. And, she's, head of that household, but she's also got a full-time job and she's trying to run one of the most important state house races in Texas. That combination of responsibility very often does not fall on a man. And so I'm excited to support these women. I want to make sure that they have every competitive advantage in fundraising, in the focus and attention of the electorate, where I think I can be helpful. And then also, again, really importantly, in bringing to bear these thousands of volunteers across Texas who are willing to knock on doors and make phone calls on their behalf. And then last thing, I'm just convinced that if more women held elected office, we would be a better, a stronger, a more powerful country. You would not have this diminishment of reproductive health care rights in states like mine in Texas, which are not simply a function of access to abortion, but are primarily a function of health care and in many cases, a life or death matter. You start to have women majorities in state legislative bodies, and we will make much better decision. So I'm really excited about these candidates that we're seeing in Texas. Again, a field that's really dominated by women, and then in many cases, women of color.
So tell our listeners how we can all help out with this effort and make a sales pitch for us all to come to Texas this summer.
Well, first of all, I would love to see you. And I want to thank those who are listening right now who picked up a phone or texted for us, even if they didn't live in Texas, in the 2017-2018 Senate campaign, and the many crazies who drove down to Texas and, just parked themselves in our state, knocked on doors for a weekend or a week. And I count myself among the crazies now willing to do that. I drove across the state of Texas to go knock on doors in Fort Bend in January. So this organization is called Powered by People, and the website is poweredxpeople.org. So instead of the word by, it is spelled with an X, poweredxpeople.org. And there you can sign up, and we'll then call on you to join us. And again, if you can knock on doors in Texas, we would gladly have you and host you. If you can phone bank or text to support these state house candidates in, again, the most important series of elections in the most important year of our lives, we'll take that help as well. And you can also make a donation, and those grassroots donations fund the organization, the organizers, the technology behind everything that we're doing right now. And maybe leave you with this. It's hard to think of a state that could make a greater impact on this country, our democracy, and the decision before us in November of 2020. If Texas, through this grassroots organizing, starting at the state house district level, is able to stop Donald Trump and deliver the 38 electoral college votes that we possess to the Democratic nominee, there will be no close margin which Donald Trump could exploit. And you know that he will. The guy will stop at nothing to hold and increase the power that he has right now. And it will also forever change the electoral landscape in this country. And it will make the big things that we want to do around gun safety or healthcare or climate or immigration that much more possible. So if you are looking for something to do, and if you are tempted to despair or become despondent, turn that energy into a positive direction and knock on doors with us. Not only will you help elect great candidates to the state house in Texas and maybe stop Donald Trump in our state, I can attest that your personal happiness and fulfillment will increase dramatically. So we would love to have you at Powered by People.
All right. Excellent. And I will say I was one of those people that texted for you in 2018, and some of the best stories I have to tell are the responses I got in texting. It was really fun.
I love that. And it's again, testament to the fact that you are making a connection with another person. And sometimes it's raw. Sometimes it's awkward. Sometimes it goes wrong. Yeah. But the times where you make a connection and you gain a commitment, and maybe even pick up a new friend, that stuff is why we do this. And so very grateful that you joined us in that effort.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. And we are all in. We're excited to flip the Texas state legislature. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. And thank you for the work that you all are doing.
Thank you for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Dimcast Podcast Network. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.